Hello to all my booty seekers and cheek chasers. This is the Carpe Natem Podcast. I'm your host, Nate De La Hoya-Reynoso, and I'm so grateful you are listening to this episode. If you're new here, you should know that I believe that my purpose is to uplift, inspire, and educate others to communicate masterfully so that they can better understand themselves and others. I've spent years in the personal development and transformational technology space, and I want to share with you the wisdom that was passed down to me from giants in the industry. So if you are on a journey of self-mastery, just like me, looking to make dreams a reality and willing to be a leader for your family and community, then join me in seizing the butt cheeks of life and giving them a big ol' squeeze. Let's jump into the show. Before we begin this episode, I would like to preface it with a sensitive content warning label. This recording was done at the house of the guest of my podcast. Him and I had just had dinner. We were both a little inebriated and decided to do a podcast. Now, I do believe that this is a great episode. I believe that allowing conversations to happen, whether the topic be sensitive or potentially triggering for others, a conversation still needs to happen because communication and effective communication leads to a better understanding of one's own personal views as well as the ability to understand others who may share conflicting views with your own. Now, with that being said, all thoughts expressed on this episode are of my own, as with every other episode that I have on this podcast. These thoughts are my own and are in no way, shape, or form directly correlated to anyone that employs me, anyone that contracts me, any family or friends. My words and actions are my own and will remain that way until the day I die. And if there's something that is said that maybe my understanding is lacking some knowledge, please feel free to send me information or research or books to look at. I'm always doing what I can to cultivate my own beliefs and ground them in more solid thinking. And in order to do that, I need to have access to conversations, knowledge, history, context. So please do your best not to go into the comment section and write hateful things, but instead I implore you to try and educate in the same way that I try to, by just giving information, saying, hey, these are the resources that I believe could change your opinion or that you should add to your plethora of knowledge so that you can further understand why you think the way you do. And I would absolutely love that. So again, my words, my thoughts, my opinions have no associations with any employer, employee, business relationship, friend, family. All of this is of my own. And I really hope that conversations like this and all conversations on this podcast can bring you some benefit in some way. I'm not perfect. I'm not going to get things right all the time. And maybe 10 to 15 years from now, when I'm looking back on these episodes and reviewing them to see how much I've grown, I may have difference in opinions. I might have completely changed on certain stances. It's all dependent on what I've been through, what I understand, what I've experienced, as it is with everyone else on this planet, as well as everyone listening to this podcast. We all have our own experiences that shape our thinking, and I do not want those experiences to limit the possibilities where we are unable to understand others and understand ourselves better. With that being said, please enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Carpe Natem Podcast. I am joined today by a very good friend of mine that I made out here in Austin. He's a very hilarious comedian. He's been playing all around Austin. He's been playing in Atlanta and in
a bunch of other places. He's also played in the Bay Area. The very, very funny Gabe Kerr. Welcome. How you doing, buddy?
Cheers, man. Thank you for the introduction. Very kind. Good. It's good, man. Life is interesting. I feel like the world is close to getting back on track.
Yeah, it almost feels like it's about to be the return of man, like it's man coming out of the cave.
Yeah, the final frost is melting.
Exactly.
And we're like waiting to emerge. Like that's it both just the things that are happening, but also just like there's an energy in the air. Like it feels like
we're ready to come back.
Yeah.
There's ready to be a comeback. But places like Florida and Texas have just been wide open.
Yeah. But even places like this, it's limited in the fact that there are a lot of people that are still uncomfortable living like that, even here. And so those people you don't see, you know what I'm saying? Like they're not out and about and doing things like we are.
There's plenty of people who are overly precautious and still want to make sure, for whatever the reason, reason they may have to do so. And that's what they're right to do. But I think now everybody's kind of coming back to life, coming out more to shows. I've seen, movie theaters full again.
Shows have been packed. Yeah. What we do is obviously benefiting a lot from that. Although comedy was kind of the one thing that people kept showing up to when everything else kind of fell away. So, we were lucky in that. And obviously being here, we both came from the Bay Area, and it was not conducive.
Yeah, that's something that we have in common is that we both happen to work for marijuana dispensaries in California around the same time. However, because you were in San Jose and I was in San Francisco, we never crossed paths.
Never ran into each other.
Yeah. And then we both moved here around the same time. And I'm actually coming up on my year. On the 28th will make 1 year since I moved over here to Austin.
Very nice. Yeah, I'm like 3-4 weeks away from a year. So yeah, we were real close at the same time.
And then we met through just open mics.
All of the things that could have connected us there, that we never crossed paths. And obviously there's a shitload of people there, but we were in the same, groups, like connected to the same people. It's odd that we never made that connection there. But then I this has kind of been an environment for that, because the same thing happened with Charlie. We're both originally from Chicago, and he and I had never met before we both got here. Like we had kind of interacted on some level online, but we didn't meet in person until we got here.
It seems like Austin really brings people together, and like-minded minds flock to the same place, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's like you said, it's open. People are able to still do things here, and obviously that attracts anybody who's not afraid to go outside.
And I'm really excited to get back to some sort of sense of normalcy.
Yeah, a lot of people will still hold off until they get permission, and that's fine. Like you said, that everybody's in a different place. But yeah, for all of the people who weren't living for the last 2 years, it feels like they're gonna have some freedom as well.
I've been thinking a lot about the people who've been like not living even before the pandemic happened, the people who were too afraid to do anything. And now that, COVID is something that's serious, that some people could actually point to and be like, this is the reason why things didn't happen for me. Now you've got a reason. Now you actually have a reason. And there's definitely people like varsity athletes that lost everything because they couldn't play, in 2020, 2021 because of all the restrictions, depending on where they were. Like, I still think about all those people who didn't really have anything going on prior to the COVID and like during the shutdown.
Oh, there were as many people through this whole experience that were like, fuck yeah, everybody's living where I'm living now, versus the people who were like, this is terrible. Like a lot of people, even admittedly, have been living the way that we've all been living the last 2 years for their whole, human experience, which is terrifying that so many people could be comfortable in that position.
And things that we do where we're going out kind of doing open mics, immersing ourselves in like a culture and trying to, make as many connections as possible. And not just in comedy, but I've done it in like sales. I've done it in like, outsourcing and looking for people. And what really do you think sets somebody apart that is able to do that compared to others who just tend to kind of take the easier path or avoid taking risks or doing anything adventurous, even if it's for the sake of growth or for the sake of having that new experience?
I feel like there is equal amounts of what you're given and what you do with it in every circumstance. So some people I don't think are equipped to really exist openly and consciously in the world. I don't think everybody's built for that. I really don't. It would be not like, the nirvana idea is that everybody, gets to a higher consciousness and, lives in harmony. But like, I don't think everybody's there. I don't think everybody can get there. So I think some of it is an amount of what your experiences led you to becoming as a person. And then given those moments of opportunity, what you do with them. Because it's also true that a lot of people who are built for that existence never will experience it because they never make that jump. They're scared. They're looking for, what we were alluding to. They're looking for an excuse to never try. And so anything that comes up, they're going to do that. So I don't know that there's necessarily a formula. I grew up in a super, super strict religious upbringing. And so, like, really being open to the world and reality is not something that I was taught at a young age. Certainly I was taught to just, like, obey and do what you're told and listen to authority and don't question anything. Like, that was beat into, quite literally, all of my experience. So that was not a natural thing that I came to. It was something that was very uncomfortable. Like, when I walked away from my faith, it was, I would say, 2 or 3 years of, like, real dark shit. Like, deep depression, deep disconnect from reality and people and everything, because that was everything that I understood.
Yeah, and I've had conversations with people where they think that having a religion is actually more impeding in their life than to not have one. But I feel like for the mass majority, or for, I don't know, it's like that one thing of, if it's true for you, then it's true for you. But I do believe that having a sense of spirituality, having some sort of belief in a higher power, in like a oneness and something that we can all communitively come together under, does end up propelling not only the individual self forward, but then like the whole group collective as well. And I'm not saying join a religion, but just to have that idea that there is something kind of like bigger kind of drives you to it. But if it's forced into your mouth, because I went through 9 years of Catholic school, and anytime I had questions about anything that they practiced or that they did,
no room for it.
No, it is seen as disobedience.
Yeah.
When I genuinely
Doubt
just had the
is
curiosity.
a sin. Like, you can't quite, like, it's built into, which is why it works as a system, because built into it is the idea that you don't get to question it. And even further than that, what you're alluding to is that it's bad, you are in the wrong for even having the thought of questioning the things that you're talking about.
Right. And it actually pushed me to learn more about different religions, and kind of got my interest in mythology started, because I wanted to understand, like, if what y'all say is true, and you're saying that your answer is the number one answer, the only answer, the correct answer,
which all of them are.
Which is
amazing how they all pull that off.
Right. It's like not a one size fits all shoe. Just like not every pair of leggings is going to fit everybody the same way. You're going to have different variables, and if it works for a majority, then there must be something here that is good to use. And I feel like when it comes to things like the Bible, I'm not a big Bible thumper, but there are things in there that can be taught on like a very spiritual level, where there are things it's like a how-to guide on how to live life. It's a personal development book started by people fucking 3,000 years ago, right?
Yeah, I mean, the reason why any religion creates a natural draw, because it's not all forced. There is a natural draw towards that experience.
To be part of the collective, to be part of the group.
Part of it's just the group, but it's also because all of them, in some way, are based on some universal truths. So you can find that in all of them.
Yeah.
If that's what you're looking for.
Wherever laws overlap.
Also built into them is the idea that, like, you have to, like, you're on this team and you can't be on any other team. Which is natural for humans. The problem is, if you're team Android and I'm team iPhone, like, we'll give each other shit about it. If I'm team Christian and you're team Muslim, I'll crusade you over it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Stuff
it gets
like that.
way more fucked up with religion, obviously, through history. which is the downside of it. But I think yeah,
and all the current scandals that have happened, like the fact that I was raised Catholic and everybody knows that, you know,
Yeah.
I'm not speaking bad about it. There's some good people in the religion. None of the priests that I knew ever really did anything terrible that I knew of, right? But it's to the point, you know, if it's crazy that it became like a pandemic within itself.
But that's another thing that's like,
And it pushes people away from the word. And like sometimes some things are good. And it's not saying that everything should be adopted, but what works for you and what can work for other people, let's share that information around.
Yeah. The problem is with doctrine, you get crazy things like that scandal, specifically what you're talking about. The reason that happened is because you had a bunch of people that had to pretend they had no sexuality for their entire existence, which is impossible. And when you suppress that, the way it ends up coming out is always bad. Like, always.
Yeah.
So
historically,
it makes sense. Like, it's not like, you know, whatever, it's fine. But like, if you take a bunch of people and force them to repress an entire facet of their experience and existence,
it's going to come out and manifest in other ways, in aggression, in power struggles, in ego.
You make
in
all
the
priests
worst
take
case scenarios,
you know, vow of fucking celibacy. That's impossible. It's not
chastity.
It's not what we're meant for. Like, we're meant to fuck. Like, that's part of who we are. Like, it's just reality. So like,
for most,
taking that away, no, for all. Like, that's not like,
come on. That's again, it goes to the idea of like the one size fits all shoe. That's the idea that
that's part of your biology. That's not either or. Like, everybody has the desire to fuck.
Most.
No, everybody. You could have had some negative experience that supersedes that biological desire, but it's still there.
We're arguing semantics here. But I understand your point. It's just like there's facets of your being that need to be expressed in all ways, because the reason we
suppress them, it'll come out.
The reason we have our emotions and to begin with is for defense tools. They're used to better distinguish what's an enemy, what's not, what's able to be eaten, what's not. Like even the feeling of disgust, which is a real heightened emotion, that's so that it's a survival mechanism. So we know that what we're ingesting or what we're eating doesn't poison us. So just like the drive for sex, the drive for love is definitely a major driver.
Yeah,
and
so
doing
people
that,
keep happening. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, so that the species continues. It just goes to a point where like when things start being messed up, how soon should you go in and correct what you do? Like redevelop, I guess maybe.
Again, that depends on how
the structure of things, how they are, so that stuff like this doesn't happen going forward.
But ultimately, as long like with religious structures, you're never going to fix them because they're broken to begin with. The idea of
are they too old to fix? They can't be modernized in any way?
No, I don't think so.
Or has the reputation been damaged to the point where they're like they can't come back?
They're based on empirical truths that don't exist. All of them. 100% of religion are based on this is true, but also reality is maybe it's not.
Right.
And
who
so
truly knows?
So like all of it's based on that. So
Right.
you can't fix that. Now, can you have spirituality? Can you have people who are and like I am fully removed from that like type of experience. It doesn't interest me. But when I hear a song that like really connects with me, either the sound of it or the words of it or whatever, like that's a spiritual experience. Like I'm not ignoring the fact that part of humans exist. I just don't believe in any kind of structure or answer, because ultimately all of those things are just some people a long time ago said some shit. That's it. That's literally all it is. Just like what we're doing now. Mm-hmm. What if 1,000 years ago people built a religion on this conversation that's literally just two people like saying what's coming out of our ass, but then religion.
It's a passed down guide of how to survive, because it's always the elders that come up with the wisdom. Like you have to be able to plant trees that you will
protected, which is always also why they became like weird systems. It was like the priests are the only ones that can read the specials. Once it
becomes organized, it's like inevitable to become like a power structure. Then somebody has like an ego, and then it ends up turning into this thing where I know the answers, and then there's the rebellion who wants to know. It's always the person who's looking to seek the truth and to know what the fuck is actually being said. People like Martin Luther, who went into the church and were like, we translated it into German. Tell us exactly what parts are you highlighting, because the people at the time had the secrets. And there's always people looking to give, I guess, the people the red pill to let them open, to let them know, like, hey, these are the things behind the curtains. But some people react and some people don't. What do you think really differentiates someone's ability to see? There's people who would love to stay in the idea of the Matrix. It's the system that works for them.
Oh, no, absolutely.
And they want to continue it.
People. That's just the reality of it. There are people who are completely comfortable never knowing the truth.
There's also the people that take the red pill then regret it, because they're just like, once you know, once you know.
Yeah, I have a buddy who, when I was going through all of that, got very, very close to walking away from Christianity as well. And it scared the fuck out of him. He got to that point that I got to, where I was like, depressed and, disconnecting from all those things, and he couldn't handle it, so he ran back. Mm-hmm. And he'll never leave. Now, like he had that experience and it scared him too much, and he'll never leave the closet, as it were. The Christian corner closet. So I don't know. I don't think, like I said, I don't think everybody's built for it. I don't think it's for everybody to live fully. There's too many people. Imagine 7 billion truly, society wouldn't work. If everybody was truly conscious, nobody would give a fuck about all the stupid shit that has to happen for a society to work.
You don't think if everybody rose to a complete level of consciousness that was at a higher plane of existence?
Anybody would be a garbage man if everybody was
because things because if you got to a point where everything was that level, you would eliminate shit that's can be automated, because it just becomes improvements where for example,
but you still have to the world is still what it is. So
it still is, but
from here to there.
In increments, because there was a point where we used to shit in holes, and now we don't do that. We buy homes where we can shit in toilets that get put into a plumbing system that I have no control over or ever have to worry about. It's just things end up becoming automated and innovated.
Again, in that system, I don't think that those types of changes, I don't think they change the overall number of people who are still drones and who aren't. People,
do you still believe there needs to be more people that need to be broken out of the Matrix, woken up to a sense of hey, this is what's really happening behind the curtain?
I think everybody should get the option.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. To have the choice to know.
Everybody should have that moment where they get to see clarity for a moment and decide ooh, no thank you, or fuck yeah, I'm jumping. But I think
comes down to personal choice, and
but I think
and the ability to have the choice.
Made that choice.
Yeah.
By choosing to not be conscious of the choice that they're making.
Yeah, some people are purposefully ignorant. There are those who are genuinely just don't see anything wrong with anything that's going on. And I'm not saying that right now what we live in is currently fucked up. And right now, I think we're in the greatest place to ever be in existence. Everything's the safest and easiest to access, with plenty of resources and all the information that we could have ever. Does that mean that there's no room for improvement? Absolutely not. We're supposed to get to a point where we can do better for ourselves and then for the people that we love. It's the concept of tend to the garden you can touch. Because if you're trying to save the world, but you can't even save the things that are closest to you, then, have you truly succeeded or have you truly failed if you do save the rest of the world, but you couldn't tend to the family that you have? You couldn't tend to the woman
Billy
that you
Graham
love.
leading massive crusades across the country, and all of his kids were fucked up people.
For sure.
Because he was a terrible dad. Because he was never doing that job. There was a point where I definitely felt like religion was something that should be just done away with.
At some point I did too. I felt like after a certain point of just being force-fed for so long, you turn away from it, but the rediscovering of it at your own pace and freedom to do so.
I don't have any taste for it, but I believe that there are a lot of people who need something.
Something, for sure. It wouldn't work for so many people if it didn't, but it's not for everybody.
I feel a sense of power and understanding finding that in myself. But for most people, that's not possible.
Yeah.
That's tough battle.
No,
Finding the God within is much more difficult than finding the God in the book that someone gives you. So, like, it is a very difficult place to be self-sufficient to the point where you don't need any kind of outside. But that doesn't mean the other things I don't need. I have community. I have to have that, right? Like, I couldn't just exist without people that I love and consider family and friends and all that. Like, that's necessary. That aspect of it. But also the morality, like what you were saying. Even though you walked away from that structure, that doesn't mean that I am going to be a shitty person for the rest of my life. I still don't think it's good to steal from people or lie to people. Like,
murdering is bad, and most of us can agree on that. You don't need a religion for that.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I think that religion is redundant. I don't think it's really necessary.
I used to call it a crutch, and I still kind of believe this because
for a lot of people.
when I obviously grew up Catholic, so like I knew all the prayers and all that BS, but like when I was eventually rediscovering spirituality, I would say thank you, universe, thank you, to the mother source, thank you to the same thing. But it's the same sandwich. Yeah. You're just choosing what the tomato is. So it could be God, it could be mother source, it could be, great wisdom, ancestors, whatever it may be. It's still that positive energy that you're pushing forward. Yeah, and I think that it goes back to the basic principles that we mentioned earlier, like the real understandable, easily understandable universal truths, like practicing gratitude, helping one another, be kind to others the way you would want to be treated. It's just universal principles to like live what some would consider like a good life. Yeah. Even the Satanic Bible, I've read that stuff, and there's nothing on those 10 Commandments that I don't really disagree with.
No, ultimately,
necessarily, like...
Yeah, ultimately, the idea of outward gratitude, I don't feel it needs to have a target anymore, but the principle of being grateful for the things in your life that you don't deserve, you didn't earn, you don't have any way to attach it to yourself other than the fact that it happened, I think that's necessary. I think it's just as dangerous to internalize that as it is to the over the top, like, you don't get any credit, everything is the glory to God. I think both of those are dangerous. Either believing that like you had no hand in anything because that takes everything away from you.
Have you heard that story where the man was lost at sea and he kept praying to God and saying, God will save me, and a boat passed by,
exactly,
and then a ship passed by, and then like a helicopter passed by, and every time the priest was like, God will save me, don't worry, move along. And when he died, he said, God, why didn't you save me? He's like, I sent a boat, I sent a ship, and I sent a helicopter. It's just like, you didn't... Yeah, exactly. It's like God helps those who help themselves. That's another one. Or yes, there's a part of like hard work, good work ethic, and then also the ability to like not complain. I feel like that's a big one where you're able to just like... Everybody's putting in the work. But are you doing it with like a smile on your face, or are you every step of the way are you like, fuck, shit, fuck? Like, are you super upset about it? So
yeah, and I think there's some of it, like, some people are given a shit hand, and like,
absolutely, and there's people who have gotten great hands and don't do anything with it, which
absolutely.
It's the variability of people. Yeah. And when you go back to like, not everybody will reach a higher consciousness. I believe that it's not for everybody, but I believe that there should be more people that should be given the opportunity to. Yeah. Why didn't I learn any of this in like school? Why didn't I learn anything like this in like traditional schools of just like gratitude practices, meditations? Some preschools have it, and some people are incorporating it in teachers. Mm-hmm. Kudos to those teachers, but like, never was I taught anything. Never was I taught any like wealth principles or just kind of like these mindset goals or goal settings or. No. I had no direction. I had no interests. I had nothing, and even the things that I did have interest in were seen as like silly or trivial.
But to be fair, our structure of school is not built to encourage.
And hentai is pretty trivial and like not the most productive use of my time. But you know what? I'm just kidding. I took Japanese in my freshman year of high school and failed terribly. And there was somebody in my class who was like mentally handicapped, and he passed.
It's funny. I took Spanish 2 years in high school. And I was a teacher's assistant for the French class. but the French teacher was hot, and I learned more French than I did Spanish.
For sure.
Like 100%. I don't know any of either really at this point, like not fluently, but yeah, I was definitely more into.
I lost my shit when I found out they had 3 alphabets. I was like, oh no.
What are we doing?
Yeah, and then words can mean like the symbols or syllables, but if they're stacked on each other like a picture, it can mean something else. And it's just like, what? Is this up for interpretation? That's wild.
Language is a weird thing. The way that they've all been built is weird. Like,
do you know what Spanish is? It's
well, I mean, all of the.
It's Nordic and Arabic mixed together. So like that's why words in Spanish and words in Arabic have like similar sound. Like pants is pantalon and pantalon.
Spanish is Latin-based.
Spanish is a bit later on, but it was Arabic, and then when they traveled up north, and then the Nords came down south, and it made the language of Latin.
Got it. Okay.
But like a lot of Spanish, or like probably not Latin, but it made Spanish. If you trace it, it goes back into like Arabic. Like sugar is azúcar, and zúcar in Arabic. Pantalon and pantalones. They're related.
Yeah.
That's where they came
Greek,
from.
Aramaic and Hebrew are the oldest still spoken languages.
Who the hell
So
speaks Aramaic except to summon a demon?
Well, no, yeah, nobody speaks Aramaic, but like it's.
Can you imagine if that was an elective in college? They're like, yeah, we learned to speak Aramaic here.
I was trying to learn. My younger brother and I at one point thought it would be cool to just like learn a dead language that nobody speaks anymore, and just like learn to speak it just to each other, and nobody, because like a lot of people speak another language, especially in America, and assume that most people don't know, and they're typically right. But we wanted to speak something no, so we tried to learn Gaelic,
so
like original Gaelic.
My wife's family speaks Mayan.
Yeah,
because they're from like the Yucatan Peninsula or whatever, the Yucatan area, so they speak Mayan, but it's like a modern version of it, but no one speaks it. And Rosario speaks it kind of and understands it. You know that movie Apocalypto?
Yeah.
She'll understand it without the subtitles. So she'll understand, like, she'll pick up on words and stuff.
Very interesting.
Super cool.
That's cool.
I kind of wanted to learn. I know a couple words, but they don't make any sense. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing them correctly. Right. There's also Mayan rappers. I think that's pretty unique. This dude raps like whole verses in Maya.
That's cool.
And they kind of go hard. They're pretty like, they go pretty hard. They're just like, yeah, dude, these are bumping.
That's very interesting.
It goes to show, like, when it comes to like creativity, whatever you're into, even if it's niche as fuck, there's an audience for it. Yeah. And as an artist, you can probably like relate to this too, because you perform. You know, you're a comedian. I've had experience in the music industry. I've always came across people who are artists who are so heavy to critique themselves and their own harshest critics, or when it comes to like lyrics or when it comes to material. And I always kind of go to this, I use the same example of like, this is why you shouldn't care, because there's a song by Bruno Mars and Cardi B that has been streamed billions of times, that has won several awards, and she says, your pussy is basura, my pussy is horchata. So if that was acceptable and played nationwide on kids shows, you know, I think you're overthinking how deep these lyrics have to be, how deep it. Just put the work out there.
Well, but also just like do something that's authentically you.
For sure.
That looks like.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's what will connect. Because the rapper that raps in Maya, like, that's somebody who was connected to that in a way that they like. Something inside them wanted to do that, which is what made it attractive to people around them.
And I think that like the best thing you can do for yourself as an artist, or just as a person in general, is to really find your true voice. Find like the thing that really inspires you, the thing that wakes you up in the morning, the thing that makes you want to learn more and do more, and kind of like go all in on that.
Yeah.
Outside of like the day-to-day, the 9-to-5 grind, if you have something that kind of keeps you going on the sidelines, something that truly inspires you, like, go all in. It doesn't matter if other people think it's silly. If it's meaningful to you, then don't let anybody else tell you otherwise, whether you should or shouldn't be pursuing it with everything you fucking got.
And I think that's tied into what we were talking about earlier with, like, finding consciousness, finding that, like, true awakening. Like, because if you haven't experienced that, anything that you do is going to be limited. It won't be to the fullest extent of what you should be experiencing, because you'll be limited by your ability to perceive those things.
Yeah, start off by like asking yourself, who are you? And like you might just think like, oh, I'm Nate. Like, okay, but who is Nate? And really break down like what you are, who you are, where you come from. Like find out like who, like to even question like your current existence. How often does somebody actually take a toll and take an account of like, okay, what's here, what works, what's functioning, what needs work? And then put any time, effort, or energy into improving that said thing.
Making those changes. Yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult even to just start that conversation, like internally. Like
it goes defensive
just to get to the point
immediately.
Where, yeah, it's tough. It's very tough to be able to ask yourself real, true questions like that to get to those answers. It is a difficult process for sure.
And it really comes at like, because you and I have both been through some shit, right? So, and that's putting it lightly.
Yeah.
But to say that I wouldn't want to have gone through all of that wouldn't be true, because the person I am right now, the person that's sitting here across from you in this current reality, is a product of those experiences, is a product of all the hardships, the trials and the tribulations, as are you. I don't think you could be as good of a father as you are if not for the experiences you had with parental units. I couldn't be the person I am with my wife if I hadn't gone through the things I did with previous partners.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to consider when you have kids, because you are aware of the reality that the hardships, the struggles that you went through are a lot more a part of who you are than the easy parts.
It's not what happened to you, but what you do with what happened to you.
Yes, but also what happens to you.
Also that, too, that it's a big factor. I can't say that, like...
So it's weird as a parent.
It's not in a consideration.
Like, there is this overwhelming urge to keep your children from bad. Like, it's imprinted in you. It's not something you're even consciously thinking about. It's just like, it's an instinct. But consciously recognizing that those things are often the most necessary parts of your growth is a very, very difficult concept to accept.
The idea of having kids terrifies me. And...
Me too.
And you have kids.
Yes. Yeah, it requires so much of you. It requires you to understand yourself better, to be so aware of the things that you do and the consequences they'll have. It's a lot. It is a lot. But like,
I just feel so selfish as I currently am, and I feel like it's within my right to be selfish because I want to experience as much as I can. I can't give to somebody else if I myself don't feel fulfilled. And I feel like that was a principle that was ingrained in me because my mom had me at such a young age, and though she loved me and always said that I was her number one, I felt like her own needs fell to the wayside so that she could produce whatever she could for the sake of her son. And as I love her for that, and I think she's an amazing woman for that experience, but it came with its downsides where I had a workaholic mom that was very adoring in material items but not in physical affection, and then I had my own battles of whatever was going on in my brain, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't even know what the heck I'm trying to say here. It's just the things that I've been through currently shape the things that the way that I think. I lost my train of thought. This is some great stuff, Gabriel.
Yes,
this is fantastic stuff, guys. I'm sorry, y'all. We are definitely having a good time behind the scenes in the podcast. We won't mention what we're doing, but it's all within our right to do so.
So yeah, that's the weird balance, like recognizing, and that's why I was saying the parental aspect adds such an extra element, because you don't want to shelter your child to the point that they're not ready for the world. But it is terrifying to watch your child go through things that can hurt them. Like everything in you is fighting, allowing that to happen. It has to.
It has to. And it's not like you can be the perfect parent and still have a messed up child. It's also the rule of the dice. Like another thing that terrifies me, and then it goes back to, I guess, it moves to the ego, where it's just like, I don't want to fail as a parent. Where I end up having the kid that's like the mass murderer or like but I guess in that point, if my kid gets his own Netflix documentary, then, high five me.
Yeah,
but
right? Like you didn't.
I'll be interviewed.
They're going to interview.
No, it's going to be terrible. But that's so terrible.
No, but
right? Where's the bar here?
The reality is
how messed up would you be if your kid is a killer, but you only got a documentary like on Hulu or like Amazon Prime, like you didn't get anything?
What's the fucking point? I thought I raised you better.
It's like $2 on Vimeo.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't think it's a roll of the dice. I think the effort you put in has specific results, and I think we don't always know what that is. So it's not a level of culpability where like
We could never control anyone else's actions, but we can always prepare for our
but also
scenarios.
you can create the parameters with which they think and behave.
Sure, to an extent.
So,
because you'll always have the rebellious child, where you mean good intentions. Like I always feel like my dad had really great intentions, but the way he came across was so rough that the message maybe never landed as it should have. But he did it with the intention of love. But if I didn't have that awareness, I would have never seen that as an act of love. I would be that as like my dad is really hard on me for no reason at all, like all times.
Yeah, but I don't know. Obviously anybody can overdo anything. Like you can be too strict, you can be too lenient. You can be, you know what I'm saying? You can go too far in any direction. And I think balance is important. But you have to I don't parent my two kids the same way.
Interesting. Why not? Because they're two different kids. Yeah.
So they need different things. And that's my job, is to provide those things that they need for the time that it's my job to do so. So it's not the same. The input is not the same as the output is not the same. And ultimately, I'm trying to teach them to be successful humans. I'm trying to teach them to be successful versions of themselves.
Yeah.
Not a copy of me, which is what my parents did, which was why I was such a piece of shit.
Interesting. So you think that most parents are just trying to make a carbon copy of themselves because they believe that that's how they should be, that's how life should be run.
There's some of it that's ingrained in us through religion, through other authority structures, that it's like you respect your parents, you know what I'm saying, but there's a natural desire, and that goes back to the team thing, for people want other people to do what they do, right? Because then we have something in common, and it goes back to the part of you that's evolutionary, the danger signals, right? But ultimately, you want people to be like you, and for your offspring, there's an added element of they represent you.
They do. So that's the other part of it, is that they're a direct representation of your effort. And that was where a lot of people can get defensive, because if you are to call out your child, if I were to say oh, your kid's this, your kid's that, you got to first find out if it's true or not, and then see what did I, and then it goes back to you. It's
how does that reflect on you?
How does that reflect on me? What did I do to make my child do this behavior? Also, no parent has this level of awareness at all times. I have seen a great variability in parents of people who from the worst people of there's no way you should have been able to have a child, should have been illegal to have, but you can't stop them from being those people.
Yeah.
And you can't stop them from having kids either, which is just fucking awful.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. That's a better word.
Yeah, I think you don't want to stop it, because a lot of good people come from really fucked up scenarios.
Genuinely, some of the people with the most entertaining personalities came from backgrounds that were a point where they had to develop it as a way of survival.
Correct.
Because they put in the effort to be funny. They put in the effort to be attention seeking, to be of some sort of value, because as a kid you have nothing to give except your behavior, your thoughts, your inputs, and all. What is that? Like, what are you going to give as a 6-year-old? What are you able to give? Nothing. You can't contribute to conversations. But those who learn to adapt and speak to adults and are able to like kind of worm their way around through really good communication, it's always what's impressed me, and that's kind of how I got through life, was just being really good at talking. For most times, like I would speak at a higher level.
We do what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's fun, but not everyone's given the gift of gab, and I feel like the most traumatized people have that ability at like a level 10. Like it's very maxed out. Like it's their strongest stat.
Because like you said, it absolutely had to be developed. You needed that to survive.
So then it becomes a question of like, what drove you to do comedy? Like, what was the drive in you? What was the need? Because I feel like comedy gives everybody something. It's validation. It's external feelings. It's a way to do art. It's creativity.
Comedy is my therapy. Comedy is my way to express to the world around me the things that I'm not comfortable saying in a conversation with somebody. But if I've got a microphone in front of me, there's some level of shield there.
When you say shield, you're trying to say that by like having the microphone, there's like a sense of a filter, because you, at the end of the day, you could say like, oh, this is for the sake of comedy, like a way of. It's like a slight backdoor slight.
It's funny if people are offended by it, like on any level.
You were working it out. You were trying it out.
Would happen in a normal conversation that would make the conversation
end immediately. Yeah.
You can get past that if there's a microphone.
That makes sense.
So you don't have to have the fear that you normally do in a conversation of like, if I say this thing,
I'm going to be labeled a certain way.
The conversation could be over, and exactly, then I am just that to that person.
And to some people, if depending on what material you use or the words you choose, you can be labeled as a certain type of person that has like a certain subset of jokes. You can just be known as that person.
But also,
same thing with any artist,
that typically
right?
happens because it comes through in everything you do.
Yeah.
Right? So it is a little bit legitimate.
I feel like your personality type is a reflection of like your comedy style, and
for sure. But the other thing for me is the reason that particularly is what I'm interested in, because those things can be fulfilled in other ways. Acting, doing some kind of speaking job. It was fulfilled in some ways when I did sales, but specifically the desire, the need to make people laugh comes from two places. Number one, the fucked up experiences that I went through. Like you were saying, I learned to make people laugh, to get out of the scenarios I needed to get out of and wasn't otherwise equipped to do so. I was too small, too, unintelligent, etc. Like I didn't have the tools, so that was the thing that I developed. But also, for somebody who's experienced a lot of really, really extreme traumatic experiences, laughter has a value beyond what it does for a normal person. Everybody values laughter. That's why we have audiences, right? Like, audiences aren't full of people like us. They're full of just regular people.
We would hope.
Right? Because otherwise they wouldn't laugh. That need is in everybody. Like, everybody, something happens when you laugh. It's a positive thing. Like, and there's chemical reactions or whatever, but, like, on a ethereal level, like it fulfills something. But for somebody who's experienced extreme trauma,
it's a coping mechanism almost.
It's a way to escape from those other things.
It's a distraction.
It is powerful enough to outweigh those other feelings, and so it's currency. It's the most valuable thing. So for me, I am giving that to the world because I see how valuable it is, and so I want it in the world. Because the more of it that's out there, the more of it that I can benefit from, right? Because I need that. Ultimately, I'm putting out there the thing that I need.
Yeah, and the intention is with purity. It's you're trying to make other people laugh. You're trying to make people smile. You're trying to say things that get people thinking.
Yeah. And
it's at the benefit of others. It's never like hate speech, or you're not up there like, going off at the rails.
Even when comics say really fucked up things that can come across as hateful or whatever, ultimately, and I'm not talking about like random people at an open mic who may or may not ever be a comic. I'm talking about like professional comics, like people who really and truly like have dedicated their life to the art of making people laugh. For those people, when they miss like that, ultimately, that's not what their intention was. Their intention was not the hurt that it may have caused. Their intention was the opposite. Their intention was to make people laugh. And often their intention is to make the very people who they offended laugh. They were hoping that they would say the thing that would bridge the gap between them and that other person, and sometimes it does the opposite.
Yeah, I feel like it's the interpretation of intention when somebody says, I put this out here for this specific reason, and it was to make others laugh, is to, you know, these are my thoughts expressing these silly ideas, and is just openly saying what their intention is, but then they're like, no, you're saying this because this. It's always somebody else's thoughts about what you're doing.
Yeah, their interpretation. Yeah,
that gets put out there, and then that becomes the truth to them. And then if enough people don't know you, but they're hearing their side first, then it becomes this thing of like, Gabe is labeled as this. This is what he stands for. Even though you've already, from the start, said, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. This is my intention. This is what...
Yeah, all of the hate that came at Dave Chappelle, all of the transphobic stuff that people were saying about him, was actively missing the point of what he was trying to do. The reality is, he was trying to bridge the gap between himself and those people. And the way a comic does that is by making fun. That's what we do. That's how we communicate.
See, this is a coping mechanism I have. It's decompartmentalizing, and by looking at fucked up situations or looking at where you have a disconnect, picking it apart and seeing where the pieces fit and how you relate them to what you've experienced in your own view of the world. So in something like what he was doing, I get the message. It was a very weird...
Ultimately,
it was a very weird...
He had a very close friend
who was part of the community,
who was a trans woman
who killed herself.
A lot of the reason that he wrote the jokes that he wrote,
and who was bullied too by her community. It was so sad.
Who was the biggest fan of the jokes that he was writing,
right?
And that was the point. He was writing, like I said,
to bridge the gap.
The way that we communicate. We say fucked up things to each other.
Absolutely.
It's not because we don't like each other. It's the opposite. It's
because we love each other.
Very, very close to one another.
100%.
So close that we can say outlandish things.
It's going to make you giggle.
Have a laugh together.
Yes.
And nobody's hurt.
No.
But not everybody speaks that language. And that was the problem. The problem is the people that he was speaking to are very easily offended. And they don't speak that language.
Yeah.
And so the message was lost.
Sure.
But ultimately, that was what he was trying to do, is what we do. Like, that's how we communicate.
And if it doesn't resonate with you, then it doesn't resonate with you. Whatever's true for you is true for you. So, you know, at the end of the day, I feel like a comic's job is to walk us through an idea and entertain us. It's just like it's trying to be thought provoking. It's trying to be something. You're trying to appeal to someone, whether it be a niche audience or to everybody, whatever it may be. You're trying to get some sort of reaction, whether you do or not is on you. But to then be like labeled and scrutinized for things over like a joke, you're just trying to be silly. Yeah. Especially if that's not your intention. Your intention isn't to be divisive. It's actually to bring people together so that we can all laugh at the commonality. But man, it's I think we should wrap this episode up. This has been a fun conversation. A lot of topics. I wonder how much of it is coherent on the playback, but it has been fun to sit down with you in your lovely home and a wonderful dinner. You're an excellent chef, a fantastic comedian, and I'm very excited for your upcoming shows. You have upcoming shows in Austin, and I've seen you perform a bunch, and I'm very excited to be your friend and to see this journey move on. Thanks for sitting with me, and anything else you want to end on before we close around?
This is a great conversation. This is a lot of fun.
This was a very fun, just a long form conversation of just fun ideas that we have and see where we align and come to some sort of like mutual understanding.
Yeah. Let's definitely do it again sometime.
I would love that. Gabe, have yourself a great night.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Carpe Natem Podcast. If you loved the episode, please consider leaving us a positive rating and review on Apple Music or iTunes. It takes 30 seconds for you, but for us,
It helps spread positivity to more people during these chaotic times. It helps build a community, and it makes me smile ear to ear. Speaking of community, we have a Facebook group. You can find us at facebook.com/groups/Carpe Natem. Just answer the 3 questions to get access to some extra motivation and inspiration for your timeline. If you would like to support the podcast, screenshot this episode, share it to your story, and tag me on Instagram at Carpe Natem 114. That's going to be my handle across all platforms, including TikTok, so please give me a follow if you'd like some more positivity in your life. If you haven't already, please rate us and subscribe on Spotify or anywhere you enjoy your podcasts. And lastly, you can find all episodes, links to resources, and opportunities for coaching and mentoring from me at carpenatem114.com. I cannot thank you enough for spending part of your day with me. You are all rock stars taking the necessary steps to be your best self, willing to do whatever it takes, and ready to grab life by the butt cheeks. Until next time, this is your host, Nate Hoya-Reynoso, signing off.